But welcome to Village Talk. I'm Shannon McNulty. I'm an estate planning attorney and founder of the Village Law Firm in New York City. And we're going to be talking today about how to talk to your kids about money. Our guest today is Amy Brackett. She's a senior wealth advisor at Revolve Wealth. And Amy, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do and your interests and background?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me today, Shannon. It's great to be here. So I work, as Shannon said, at Revolve Wealth Partners as a senior advisor. I've been in the financial industry in one way or another for the last 20 plus years, and I've spent most of that time working with individuals and families as an advisor. And in my role, I'm really day to day working with clients on everything from helping with investments and insurance to helping coordinate estate planning and tax planning. So really just being that liaison for attorneys like Shannon and helping clients with accounting as well. Helping with lending. So everything from, getting a first mortgage, buying a home to refinancing, employee benefits. So when one of our clients is starting a new job, helping with looking at all the health insurance options and the 401k and helping with investments there. And really just coordinating all those pieces of someone's financial life. So, many times there's many pieces of the puzzle that are looked at separately. And part of my job is really to look at those together. How can we look at all these different areas and help coordinate the different pieces to help run someone's life a little bit more efficiently and effectively, and really just be, a partner to our clients as they navigate these different money decisions and different financial decisions.
Great. And I think you had an interest in psychology as well, which I think, you know, many people may not know or realize, but that financial advising has a lot of psychology to it in terms of counseling clients. And can you tell us a little bit about your interest in psychology and how that affects how you work with your clients?
Sure. So you're right. So I majored in finance and accounting, and I minored in psychology, and thought about, going the therapist route because I like to work with people and talk to people. And it turns out that being a financial advisor is really a little bit of both. It's funny that you mention it because right before we got on, a client called me and said, "Do you have a minute?" And I said, "I have a few minutes. I'm doing this webinar." And she said, "I don't know what your business card says, but it should say therapist, friend, confident advisor." And she starts going on. So, a lot of my role really is to guide people, through different areas of their life and just to be kind of a sounding board. And we know from, investing that it's so much of it is an emotional decision rather than just, an intellectual decision. And there's a whole industry of behavioral finance of how people make decisions specifically relating to money and investments, which I sort of find, fascinating given my background. But, I get to work with great people all day long. And many days I do feel a little bit more therapist than financial advisor.
Okay, yeah, I think it's so important to have someone who you can talk to and feel comfortable with because money is certainly it's one of the hardest things I think for us to talk about in our society. And having somebody there's it's so important. There's so much that comes with it in terms of how we think about money, how we think about it in relation to ourselves and our family and our position in society. So having somebody who can really understand and be sensitive to all of those aspects of our financial decisions is so important. One of the things that I know that my clients kind of struggle with a lot is answering questions about money, in part because we don't have any kind of structural financial education in this country in terms of helping even adults, much less children, be able to think about money in productive and healthy ways. Um, so that's kind of why we decided that this would be a great topic for our clients. And Amy, in particular, just in talking with her, she has not just a great understanding of kind of the financial, the not just the financial, the psychological, but also just a really deep interest in teaching kids about money and how her experience has been with her own kids. And she's come up with all of these different activities that she has implemented with her own kids and helps and advises for her own clients who are trying to teach their kids about money and to make smart decisions. Um, so why don't we just start with, if Amy, you can just tell us about, when do kids start thinking about money and start understanding that this is something that plays a role in their parents' lives and it affects their own lives as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think really from an early age, and I'll say I'm a mom of two children. I have a 10-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son. And from an early age, whether we realize it or not, kids are listening to everything. They see everything we do, they hear everything we say. And things like thinking skills and reasoning skills and learning skills are developing, and from the time of birth until age 4 or 5, a child's brain is growing, fourfold in size, developing all those skills. And some studies show, Cambridge had a study that said by the age of 7, many of kids' financial habits are already formed, which is a little bit crazy to think of it. But,
Huh?
I think that kids are, they're sponges, so they see a lot. And I think just having an awareness of that, and thinking, in our own childhood, like how did our own parents and adults in our lives talk about money? And, when they grew up, it might sort of dictate, did our grandparents grow up in a post-depression era where money was tight and they talked about it a certain way? Or how did our parents talk about, spending on different things or investing? Was it a way to get rich quick, or was it, this risky, venture? So I think just having an awareness of, our own money stories and how our own parents talked about it. And then an awareness of, when we're around our kids, the things we say and how we talk about money. It's less, even what we say, but how we say it and the tone. I think kids really pick up on that kind of thing from an early age.
And does it have an effect in terms of where you live and what your surroundings are of how kids learn about these things? In New York City, we have like vast wealth. I mean, in this country, we certainly have vast wealth inequality, but in New York City, it's really hard to, I think, shelter kids from that. Um, and how does that play into how kids think about this? And I know, we have almost like a stratosphere of difference between the kind of very rich in New York and the very poor, which kids actually can see, right? You can see as you walk down the street that there's homeless people. How do we talk about these things with our kids?
Yeah, I mean, I think I live in Manhattan, and I think, what you said couldn't be more true. Just walking my kids to school, we are bumping into, people with designer handbags and then stepping over homeless people within the same block. And you have, high-rise new condo developments, condos going for millions of dollars, literally next to NYCHA housing. So it's really, a very, very diverse area. And the question of, what does it mean to be rich and have money, I think in New York is really interesting. So nationally, the top 1% is about 4.4 million in net worth. But if you live in Mississippi, top 1% is, having about 750,000. Whereas in New York, top 1%, is a little over 4 million. And in California, it's closer to 7 million. So even just within our country, there's, you know, so much diversity in wealth. And I think New York is just a great example of really just extremes, within the same city and really within the same area.
And how do we explain these things to kids when they, and even in their own lives, right? Of, well, so and so is going to this private school, and maybe we don't have enough money to send our kids to that particular school or to buy the country house or things like that. How do we answer those questions?
Yeah. So, there's a lot of questions kids ask about money. One that I know comes up a lot is, are we rich? And like how to answer that. I remember when my daughter was in kindergarten, they went around the room and everyone said what they wanted to be when they grew up. And so, one girl says, I want to be a teacher. And one boy says, I want to be a firefighter. And then the next boy says, I want to be rich. And the whole class just started laughing. So at 4 or 5 years old, these kids already have some sense of, being rich and what does that mean? My favorite, when you get these hard questions, and it's not just the money questions, but it's just as a parent getting these questions is asking, why do you ask? Because one, it buys you a little bit of time to sort of formulate a response when your kid is, asking you these things. But I also think that, a kid might be asking it for different reasons. So, a 3 or 4-year-old asking, are we rich, is very, very different from, let's say, a 12-year-old. And they may have different reasons for asking, different reasons why they're curious. And of course, with parenting, everyone has to answer these questions however it feels right. But I think that in most cases, your kids are not asking for, your tax return or your balance sheet or, exactly how much you have. It's just having that sense of security, especially, if they see someone who has so much more or so much less, just trying to understand what that means to them. And so I think depending on the age, just something simple like, being rich can mean a lot of things. It can mean having money. It can mean having health and happiness. And, we're lucky that we have money for a lot of things, that we have money for all the things we need. We live in a home, we have a car, we have food on our table, we can buy clothes and books, and we have some money for things that we want. So to do that extra vacation or to buy that extra toy or to do that extra activity, but just keeping it simple and age appropriate. Rather than, going into, we have this much and this one has this much, which is, usually above their head anyway, and really probably above what they're looking for.
Okay, so I think again, I'm getting into the different ages and different stages in children's lives is, like you said, it really has a big impact on how they think of these things and what they can understand. So let's, and you said, which was astonishing that a lot of children's ways they think about money and their money habits are formed by the age of 7. So let's talk about what can we do at these early ages to instill good money habits and good ways of thinking about these issues.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think one of the easiest things to do is just make the conversations part of everyday life. So it's not about sitting your kid down and saying, today we're going to have the money talk and giving them a lesson in financial planning. I think it's as you go to the store, as you go shopping, as you're making your own decisions, which we're all doing every day, all day long, whether we realize it or not, talk to your kids about, I'm not going to buy this because it's, costs a lot more at this store than that store, or this is on sale. So maybe I'll get, more books today because there's, buy 2, get 1 free sale. So just talking to your kids and, I call it small moments, like just these little moments that, in life, talking to your kids. I also think there's a lot of great books out there. And there's this program, Money as You Grow, which is by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And they actually have they have all these different activities, but they have a whole essentially library of books by age, different books about money, and very age appropriate to kids, like, Berenstain Bears, and just different series that kids may be familiar with that have money lessons in the books. Another one is simple, but just using cash, or introducing your children to cash. We're in a society now where everything is just, swipe the credit card, Venmo money, things are on auto pay. So kids are not really seeing cash, even in the same way that we probably were exposed to it growing up. So it can be a good way, just, for math practice as well, but just introducing your kids to, money and what it looks like. And so it's not, as abstract a concept to them.
I think it's so true. In our society now, it's very rare that we use cash. And it's funny that you say this, because one of my business coaches, one of the exercises that they had us do was to, for a whole week, only use cash, which is actually pretty challenging. And there are some things you just can't use cash with, you can't like pay your mortgage in cash. But even the things that you really could use cash for, but you're just so used to using like a credit card or debit card, and we get away from the tying money to something physical. And so I think that that is a great exercise. And definitely when you're young, the physical is more present, right? Like it's harder for us to think of, or for kids to think of, these kind of abstract credit card systems that we have. But when we're using cash, we're using dollars and cents, then that's something they can actually see. Like, okay, it takes $10, either a $10 bill or 10 $1 bills to buy XYZ at the store. And they can see that transaction and the differences between, either $10 or $50. Whereas if you just hand over a credit card, it's all the same, right?
Exactly. And I think also along those lines, going to a bank, some of you may have opened up bank accounts when your children were born, getting gifts from family or friends. But occasionally it's nice to just take your kid, to the bank, explain, like, I think a lot of kids at ATM, it's just this like unlimited, like go to the money store and take out money and the money just, comes out of the machine. But just explaining in a very simple way, like, we give money to the bank keeps it safe, depending on their age, maybe explain interest, and then when we need money, we go to the bank and we take money out. So just trying to make it a little bit more real, a little bit more relevant, as opposed to, like you said, it's so abstract, like, with everything so digital and automated these days.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because I can imagine that a child thinking, oh, well, where does money come from? It comes from the machine that mom goes to, right? And they just
I
give
think
the money.
most kids now, money doesn't grow on trees, it just comes out of machines.
Yeah,
Much
yeah.
as we need.
So removed from, okay, actually you make money, right? It's one thing, that money isn't just there, that you earn money from working or doing various things and activities, and then it is held in the bank, which is a place where you can go and then take money out. So just like those very simple concepts, which we all know theoretically, but if children don't see it, then it just doesn't exist for them.
Yeah.
So tell us, whether, how, like, concretely, you say you use dollars with your kids, like physical money. Do you give them an allowance? Should they earn the money with chores? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I think an allowance can be a really great way to introduce some of these concepts and make it a little bit more real and relevant. So, there's different schools of thought with an allowance, like most parenting things. And, one approach is to give a child, a certain amount a week, regardless of what they do or don't do. And, every week or every so often they get a certain amount of money for allowance, and they can put it in their piggy bank or do what they want. The other school of thought is to tie in the allowance with certain chores or tasks. So I know some parents will do, if you make your bed, if you do this chore or that chore, you can earn money and maybe even earn more for an allowance. So try to make it more like a paycheck and more tied to something. And there's pros and cons of both approaches. So it really depends on what works best for you and your family. I think the thing to be aware of is, if your kid is saving and saving their allowance and feels like, I don't feel like doing my chores and I don't care about earning money, just how that all plays out. But for some people, it's also a combination, where maybe someone gives an allowance of a certain amount a week, and then a child can earn a little bit extra if they, fold laundry or do something a little bit above and beyond what they're, we'll say, expected to do.
Right. And I think that there was some ideas you have about, okay, uh, how then they have this money of how we're spending it, how kids are spending it or saving it, and teaching them about those options of like, okay, once you have this money, then you have, you can save it, you can spend it, you can donate it. What are your, do you have recommendations about teaching kids those differences?
Yeah. So there's some piggy banks out there. So you're probably all familiar with the traditional piggy bank that's a cute little pig, or some sort of bank with one slot for money. But some of you may have seen piggy banks that have many slots. And there's some, like you said, Shannon, that have save, spend, donate, invest, and each of them are little areas of the pig or of the soccer ball or whatever it might be. And I really like that one because I think it's a great way for kids to really start to think about the different areas and prioritize. And so if you're giving your child, let's say $5 a week, instead of giving a $5 bill, you can do five $1 bills, you can do a bunch of quarters, but it really allows your child to think a little bit more than just, I want this toy today and I'm going to use the $5 today, but to really kind of think through, maybe I want to save some and bring it to the bank, and maybe I want to spend some on toys the next time I go to the toy store so I can put, $2 there. The invest one, depending on the age, when I first got my daughter at the bank, I think she was around 5, and I said, we'll talk about that one when you're older, but I explained in just very basic terms, this is for money you don't plan to use for a long time, and we can think about putting it away in hopes that it'll grow into more money later on, just something like that. And then donate. I think most children, will have some sense of, you know, donating, and you can explain it sort of in simple terms. I think kids may understand it more in terms of donating stuff than donating money. But if your school's ever done, a food drive or a clothing drive or toy drive where you help different people in the community, that can be a way just to explain in simple terms, we're helping people in the community who can use support. And we, maybe let's put aside some money there, and then we can buy things to help people in the community. So I really like that. It's actually not that dissimilar to the work I do with clients all day long. Clients in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, where it's really thinking through, these different buckets, and, how much should go into a cash account, just for an emergency fund, and how much should go into longer term savings or retirement savings. And, if there's debt, how much should go towards paying down, let's say, student loans? And if there's, children in college as a priority, how much should go towards college? And so we don't use piggy banks, but we do a very similar sort of exercise where we really try to map out the plan. So I think it's never too early to start.
So these things kind of, you can go from when you're 5 or 7 to when you're parents yourselves or when you're older. These concepts are kind of, they're static, right? In terms of they whether how you spend your money, they kind of carry from year to year and throughout your life. And that's maybe why it's so important to kind of learn some of these concepts when you're still young.
Exactly. The dollar amounts may change, but I think the ideas are similar, and can be good just to think about prioritizing, for a child to think about prioritizing, what they want to spend versus save, and helping them through and talking it through with them. And also for them to really understand, like, what does it mean to have $5? How much can I get a pack of Pokemon cards, or can I get the Lego set? Or, what does $5 actually mean? What does $1 actually mean?
Great. I want to, one of the things, and I think this idea of, helping kids understand and appreciate charitable donations from an early age is a really important thing. And it also is something that I think lifelong, that you can talk to your kids about. And also, I mean, from my perspective, we're often talking about legacy planning. And one of the things that I think is a great idea, is, say, parents or older parents, they want to leave money to charity, but they really want to instill those values in their kids. And they don't want to just leave it to the kids and then, for them to just donate or not. One of the things that we recommend is creating like a donor advised fund and having like family meetings every year about where that money goes. And so when you leave the money, when you pass away, then you can leave money to the fund, but you can have that as an activity that your adult children can still continue on, and that can be an activity that they do together, and then maybe even bring in their kids, right? So it can be almost like an intergenerational activity, which can be really meaningful.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, we use donor advised funds all the time. For those of you who are not familiar, it can be a great way to use appreciated securities like stocks, with low cost basis. So meaning if you were to sell it, there'd be significant taxes, and you can donate securities to a donor advised fund and get the tax deduction in that year. And then, as Shannon said, over time, give the money out to different charities. So I love the idea of doing that and involving different generations in, whatever causes are important to them.
Great. So I know we're kind of at the end of our usual time limit, but I want to open it up to questions if anyone has anything that they want to ask. You did such a great job of covering. One of the other
Shannon,
topics.
do you get a lot of questions? Because I get some on parents or grandparents who want to set up accounts for kids, whether it's, birthday money or bar bat mitzvah money, how to do it, what types of accounts.
Sure, yeah, that's a great question. We get a lot. And so just to explain, if you have a child's account, is what we call an UTMA account. Some states it's an UGMA. It's Uniform Transfers to Minors Act. And it's what we call a custodial account, meaning that it belongs to the child, but somebody else is administering it, usually a parent. That's a great, so, if your child is getting small amounts for birthdays, holidays, whatever, special events, it can be a great way to have them have experience with money. So all of those things that we were talking about, of they'll now they have their own money and they can take it to the bank, they can save it, they can spend it, they can invest it. Um, I think it's good for smaller amounts, but the thing that's really important to understand about those accounts is that you don't own them at all as the parent. So, and when your child turns 21, then they get all of the money that's in there, and you don't have any control over how they're going to use it. And so sometimes people think that this is a good idea to, well, it's definitely put away for my child. I want a way that I can just save money for my child. It doesn't go to anybody else. So I'm going to put money into an account for them, into one of these UTMA accounts and or a miner's account. And that can be great, but also realizing that, well, when if your child is 10, you're not sure at all what they're going to be like when they turn 21, and they might not. And generally I think studies have shown that, like, that's not the best age where people are making great decisions about money. Uh, your brain is still developing. They don't quite understand, necessarily have a grasp of how they should use large amounts of money. And your child, there are all kinds of things that they can go through. Unfortunately, in this country, we have enormous amounts of drug abuse and substance abuse problems. And so you're just not sure what stage they're going to be in when they turn 21. So putting that money in there when they're 10 is a little bit risky, because they could get $100,000 when they're 21 and then just say, well, either, so use it in some kind of destructive manner, or just say, well, I just want a really fancy car, right? And that the whole purpose of this was really more for their education. That's just not something that you can control. So I recommend using that for smaller amounts of money and teaching kids about money so that they can have their own account. They can have, I don't know if anybody even uses checkbooks anymore. They can have their own debit card. But I wouldn't recommend it for, saving large amounts of money for your kid's future, because it's just very risky. You just are really lacking control over that. Once you put it into that account, you legally don't have any say over how it's going to be used.
Yeah. And I've had clients who didn't realize that, and they had put a lot of money in an UTMA, and, the child was getting closer to 21, and they're like, well, that money's not really for them. I put it there, because I thought I'd use it for college, but then I had enough in my 529. Legally, it's the child. So I think that's a great point, just to be aware. Not that you shouldn't use them. We use them all the time, but just be aware of the goal of the money and how much is there. And, if the goal is, this is money for college, then it could make sense to consider a 529 plan, for example. And there's some tax benefits there. If it's a very large amount of money, you may set up a trust with an estate attorney like Shannon. So just an awareness of really, what is the money there for? And, and then kind of figuring out the best path.
Yeah, definitely. And also the that money could actually be harmful, for just, kind of surprising, and people definitely don't realize that, is that if kids are applying for financial aid, then that's going to actually adversely affect them, that money that's in that account. So these are all things and reasons why it's not a great vehicle for large amounts of money. And unless you're setting up trusts for tax planning or something like that, to set aside money for your kids, usually what I tell clients is just open up a separate account and earmark it. It's in your name, so you can still, like in an emergency, maybe you can still access that money, but at least it's sort of like, okay, it's almost like a retirement account. You just put it in, and then you just, that's set aside, and it's in a separate account. And 529s are probably a great thing, in part because they do have penalties for taking them out. It's almost like, okay, that's a really good incentive to keep it there, and they have all of these tax benefits. So yeah, so that's a really common question that I have, and a common mistake that I see parents make. And I think we're starting to have a bunch of questions. First, we have.
There's a question on, you said it's never too early to discuss money. Is it ever too late? Which is a great question. No, it's never too late. I have clients coming to me all the time that feel guilt and shame that they don't know certain things. And I always say, like, you're not expected to know this. Like, if everyone knew it, I wouldn't have a job. And most people are not learning a lot of these concepts. How does a mortgage work, and what are the components of a credit score, and how should I invest? It's not something that we're learning in school. I majored in finance, and I took an accounting, and I took all these complex mergers and acquisitions accounting and currency accounting and financial theory. And when I wanted to take a personal finance class, I was told it was only for non-business school majors, and I couldn't take it. And it seemed like the most practical, relevant course that I would ever take. And so I fought to take it, and they let me take it but no college credit. I was given no college credit, and it was at 8 a.m. But it was actually the most useful class I took. And I think it should be something, required for high schoolers and college students, but, it's really not. So it's not too late at all. And I think that, talking to your kids and learning yourself, and, there's lots of great resources online. I'm always happy to chat if there's any questions, but no, I don't think it's ever too late.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And that's something that it can really, that kind of a shame of like, oh, I haven't taught my kids, or I haven't learned it myself, is like what can keep people from moving forward. So it's definitely, just the best time to start was, was whatever, when you, maybe 5 years ago, the next best time is today, right? So definitely, I think at any time is great. And we have a question about how to get in touch with you, Amy. So if you can answer that.
Sure, I can. So you can email me at Amy, AMY .Brackett, BRACKETT at revolvewealth.com, REVOLVE, wealth.com. I can drop it into the chat. But happy to, answer any questions offline. If anyone doesn't feel comfortable posting, asking publicly, I'm happy to chat offline as well.
I had another question. We had the hand up, but we also have it in the chat, so this might answer. How do you, and this is, I think, so common, especially among my clients, that they are first generation having money, in the sense that they didn't grow up with money, but now they can afford things, and they're not sure how to teach their kids because they can't really use the same questions or the lessons that they were raised with necessarily. They're in a completely different situation. And so one of the questions we have here is, how do you try to maintain a low profile about money and prevent entitlement when your kids see that you're able to afford certain things like private school and pay for college without financial aid?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've had a lot of clients over the years who had significantly more money than I have, who really tried to shield their children and said to me, my kids have no idea how much we have, and I'm never going to tell them. And, one day we'll die and they'll find out. But until then, they don't need to know. But these kids are flying on private jets and like going to Aspen, to ski. And they clearly have some sense that there's money there. I've seen parents try to wait until I had a client who waited until the month their daughter turned 30 and had full access to a very large trust fund to even start the process of educating her at all about money and, what does it mean? So I think that, starting early, and you don't have to tell your children what you have or what you earn with numbers, but just talking broadly, and, if you're giving to charity, for example, have them involved in those conversations, or, you can talk to them about just your own, decision making. And um, it's okay, I think, to, kids understand that everyone has slightly different means. And I don't think you have to give um, specific numbers or information, but I think, just involving your children in those conversations and helping them understand what it means, and, even introducing just basic, investment concept and financial concepts can be helpful.
Uh, and I think also more than like how much money you have is like how are you using the money? And this is something you raised earlier, of much more so than what we teach our kids is how we model what what we want them to, or what our model our behavior. And that's much something that's probably they're going to absorb more than maybe just explaining it to them. And so I think more than like, okay, how much we have is how are we using the money and why are we using it for these things? It's important for we really value education. And so that's why we're paying as much as we can to send you to the best school. Or we really, and we're able to do that, and we're grateful, right? And we're lucky and we're fortunate to be able to do that. And not everybody has that, but we are fortunate enough to do that. And the other side of that is also, okay, we can afford to pay the full tuition. That means that we're helping somebody else who can't pay the full tuition, right? That they need financial aid. So kind of looking at it in terms of values and what is valuable to us, and what we are spending money on is just a reflection of those values.
Well said.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions? Is that enough, or I don't know, Sandra, you had your hand up, so I don't know if you want to talk, we're happy to hear you. Or
She's good.
I think we're good.
Okay.
Okay, great. Well, I hope that this was a helpful discussion. I think it was really interesting and it's really valuable. So thank you so much, Amy, for joining us and sharing your knowledge. And if any of you would like to reach out to Amy, you'll have her information in a follow-up email. But also, Amy, do you want to just put your information in the chat as well?
I did drop it in the chat. So.
Okay. Great. And you can also just respond to the email about this conversation, about this webinar, and we'll see that you get to the right people. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.